Welcome back to the Colony Pit. We are here with Frank Ferraro, part two. If you didn't check out part one yet, please go to our YouTube channel and check out Frank's discussion on part one. And while you're on our YouTube channel, give us a subscribe, a like, a share, a comment, anything that'll make us feel good. But Frankie, we talked in part one about your, was it 27-year career and still going at Hannaford. You started in college there and are still employed there. Tell us about what your position is with Hannaford now, like what store or what area you're working in. And then also, I think our audience would be curious to know what it's like to manage a store during the height of the pandemic chaos. So that's a lot right there, but fill us in on that.
So I've been an assistant store manager in this unit store for the last few years. I was a router before that. I did a brief stint in Troy. And as far as the pandemic goes, that was probably the craziest time because we had no idea what was going on.
Right.
I remember it was a Thursday, things started to pick up. You start hearing rumblings, things getting closed down. It was more big down in the city area than it was up here. And then Friday afternoon, the floodgates opened up, and there was lines down the aisles. It was the basics: toilet paper, meats. People were just buying things to buy them. I think like frozen pizzas. Like, who buys this garbage? And like I said, it was nonstop. Like at that time, we on a weekly base we would do 850,000. That week, we did over $1 million of business.
Wow.
So, and that at that time, that was a pretty big deal. And I just remember we would get the information from customers, like, "Oh, Trump's going to do a press conference at 4 o'clock. He shut the country down." Oh, really? We haven't heard anything about that because we're literally on the floor doing what we do. And I remember as a Thursday night, one of our truck drivers, he came to the front door, and customers were almost tackling the guy because they knew he had stuff on his truck, like the paper towels. So I tell them, like, listen, going forward, just go through the back because you're going to be dealing with this every night when you come through the door. And we couldn't bring stuff out during work hours because people were tearing pallets apart. And then once we knew things were shut down, we would open the store up at 6, and between 6 and 7, we had like senior hour. And literally, senior hour, and if you had any kind of medical issues, you got to come in early before the store actually opened. I remember pulling into the parking lot every morning at 6, and the lines were like Black Friday lines. Like they were almost wrapped around the building. And they would go to the paper aisle. They would go to the soap aisle, vitamins. That's stuff they were buying. And if we didn't have it, they were just doing an about face and walking out the front door. And people were buying. They wouldn't buy. We had to limit things too. You could only buy like one thing of toilet paper, one thing of hand sanitizer. So it was pretty crazy for a few months. And
Yeah.
you'd go there, and we were the only thing open because at the time everything was closed. So you couldn't go to the mall, you couldn't go anywhere. So we were it. So a lot of people would just come out just to walk the store to get out of the house.
Right.
And I'm like, man, why are you people here? Just go home. 'Cause I'd come home, and it was weird. I come home, I'd take all my clothes off because you didn't want to. You didn't know what you were bringing home, you know. So I'd go home, change, take a shower, and do it all over again the next day.
Did you ever have to break up any fights?
That happens even now. So that wasn't a COVID thing. That happens all the time. As a matter of fact, we had a lady a few weeks ago walk out the door with a $1,000 worth of a product in her cart.
Wow.
And she was I had a cop outside waiting for her. The cop approaches her, and she's put up a big stink. The movements, the whole 9 yards. Say she's gonna, relieve herself on her, and she did relieve herself. So it was a mess. So that happens more often than not.
Wow.
I was going to ask you.
When I worked in
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I worked in Troy for about 2 months. I actually had an armed guard there from 2 in the afternoon to 11 o'clock at night. And he was fully armed. If anything happens, he was almost responsible for that.
Yeah. It's
So I was going to
serious.
ask you, so what's the wildest stories that throughout your whole time there that has happened in the store when you were there working, or, you were off that day, but you heard about, was it?
When I was in Rotterdam, they pulled me out of a meeting one day and they said there was a domestic abuse in the parking lot. And I assumed it was the actual parking lot, not the way to the parking lot. So as I'm walking out, there's this guy and his family are sitting on the bench. And again, I'm not realizing what's going on. And he goes, he's got a knife in his hand. He goes, if you come any closer, you're next. So I grabbed the lady's phone because she was on with 911. I said, listen, get somebody here. We're not going to put up with this. Cops come. Then he starts mouthing off the cops. Tasers come out. They're about to tase him. And then they cuffed him and he leaves. But that's probably one of the wildest things I think I've seen.
Jeez.
Yeah, I think
And
the
I
rest.
always, go ahead, Matt.
No, I was just gonna say, I think a lot of us are insulated from those stories because I know I used to hate going to the supermarket during the height of the pandemic, and the general public, we used to just have to get in there and get out, and takes however long it took, half hour, 45 minutes sometimes, in the worst of it. But I can't imagine having to deal with that every single day. Were you working crazy hours during that time too?
In the beginning, I'd work like 6 to 4, 6 to 5. I'm salary, so
Right.
if I'm there 5 hours, I'm getting paid for 45. If I'm there for 10 hours, I'm still getting paid for the 45. So it doesn't matter how long I'm there for, I'm still getting paid the same. Which
Yeah.
that's the downfall of being salaried. But yeah, there was some long days, especially that first week and a half. I think I was there one day. It was 7 to 7 because you just couldn't keep up with anything. It was just nonstop, just people. And I at one point I'm like, we have nothing left to sell. What are they buying? The shelves are empty at this point.
That's
Yeah.
funny you said that. When that was happening at work, we went across the street and Whole Foods was there. And we would walk by and literally think everything was cleared out of the shelves except like rice or anything else. Everything was gone. And I just kept asking myself, what is the fascination with hand sanitizer and toilet paper? Because there was like literally almost brawls going on in Whole Foods of all places for that. And I was just like, wow. And then we didn't really realize the following week they like literally shut everything down, and we were there and we just saw the shelves slowly get depleted, and the people in Whole Foods are like, there's customers agitated saying, hey, we want this stuff, and they said, hey, the truck's coming in, just be out here. And I just remember driving by one morning, like you said, seeing that line like going for a rock concert. It's like, this is crazy.
And then you get those people you see the sanitizer on eBay for a gross amount of money. And the other part of COVID that doesn't get talked about a lot is people didn't want to work at that time, and people were getting coming out sick. So in New York State, you could be out for a week or two, still get your full pay with COVID. So you've got that extra stress of not only the business you're doing, but you're also understaffed, and that understaffed piece of it really didn't come back until probably end of last year. I mean, that's how, because other things evolved during that time. That your Door Dashes,
Yeah.
that's the people in Instacart. People are doing other things to make money. Where why am I going to work in a grocery store and get paid this, where I can do what I want, do my own hours, and get paid a little more, maybe. So that
Yeah.
was a challenge that evolved during COVID, also.
Yeah, I remember that too. Using, I think it was on Amazon, like you could have someone go pick up your order at Whole Foods. I mean, that was like the closest thing to me. I just keep saying it because it was like 2 miles away from me. But I was like, oh, this is wild. Someone will actually go shopping for me, so I don't have to go in there. But it also, I remember that time too. It said, don't go if you don't have to, and have someone else do it. And like you said, and then DoorDash, and I was like, oh wow, look at this! I have people deliver me food, picking up my groceries. Like, this is next level. And that was good for like 2 weeks. And I'm like, man, I got to get out of the house and go do something. Cause I was literally in there. I think at the time too on Netflix it was Tiger King. I don't know if you remember that. Like,
Yep.
that was the whole thing that was going on. And people, in the government, they're texting because no one, literally, like, the government stopped working. And people were like, hey, did you see this Tiger King episode? And like you said, they're just watching. I think we probably watched the whole whatever was on Netflix, we watched until they said, hey, we're going back to work. So yeah, those were wild times.
It was crazy because when I had COVID late. It was the week of my birthday, so it was the end of October. And I was on vacation, so I'm like, man, I don't want to have COVID. So we went out, drove to Herkimer to get a rapid test, and it came up negative. I'm like, oh, sweet, I don't have COVID, I got a cold. So I work out every morning about 4 to 5 at the gym, religiously. So the next day I go back to the gym, and it feels like, man, I'm pushing cars at this point. I'm like, man, I just don't feel right. My pre-workout drink tastes like water, but I'm thinking that's probably because I've been having cough syrup, so it's probably killed my taste buds. So that Friday, we go to get Starbucks, and I get a Frappuccino that tastes like water again. I'm like, oh, this is a problem. So I go to urgent care. I tell the guy my symptoms. I get the test. And he just looks at it. He goes, hey, good luck to you. I'm like, good luck to you. Good Lord. Well, that's all I'm going to get? He goes, if you got it, you're, hunker down. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. Words of encouragement. But I was out for probably 2 weeks with that.
Wow.
I probably lost 10 to 15 pounds. Going back to the gym, it took a lot to get back to where I was before, but it was tough. And I
Wow.
wasn't. It had nothing to do with being in shape, being out of shape. It was just. It took a toll on you because you weren't doing anything.
Yeah. So what happened? So I guess, how do we get involved in the podcast world? How do you guys get your start there?
It was the idea. We kicked around some ideas. We didn't want to. At first, we didn't want to do just wrestling. We wanted to do it like Chris Jericho does. A lot of different topics. He does music. He does politics. Or Joe Rogan. We want to do that kind of format. But it always came back to wrestling. Like we would have Zoom meetings once a week, a good month or two before we actually launched the podcast. The four of us would get on, or three of us, any combination. Hey, let's talk about this. Let's do this. Let's do this. And then Bobby went on. I think he did a virtual signing, and he mentioned it. And I'm like, oh God, now we gotta really, we gotta do this now. He's mentioned it. It's out there. We're gonna do it. So he was in doing a show in, I want to say, Oregon, Portland, out west someplace, northwest. So he was hunkered down in a hotel. Dennis hooked. We did it. Like I said before, it wasn't one of our shining moments, but we learned from it. Dennis had all the ins because he works for at the time he was at iHeart, so he knew how to navigate, edit, do all that stuff because that was important. Because the first episode there was dead air, it just wasn't tight. So he took care of a lot of that stuff and made it good. He knew a guy who could do the opening music and all the intros, that stuff. So as time went on, we had some guests on. A lot of the guys that Bobby knew in the business, Rocky Romero, guys like that. And then I had seen this guy who was launching this thing called the Premier Streaming Network, and it was going to be a wrestling-based network of mainly independent stuff, but they somehow secured the rights to old stuff that like Adam Cole was in when he was on the come up. Those guys. So I reached out to him like, hey, we got this podcast. Might want to, we do have a visual and an audio portion of it. Would you want to, do something with it? He goes, sure. So that's when last January, we were on the Premier Streaming Network. Our first guest was Eric Bischoff,
Oh,
formerly of
nice.
WCW. Again, one of those deals, connections. It's all about connections. I emailed him. This is the surreal thing. I emailed him back. Then finally he goes, hey, call me. I'm like, what? I'm actually at work. I'm like, I'm going to call Eric Bischoff. Oh, you know what? Whatever. Pick up the phone, dial his number. He picks the phone up. He says, hey, what's going on, man? I'm like, yes, sir. How are you? He goes, I'm doing good. Let's eat dinner, though. So sorry. I explained on the show. He goes, I'd be happy to come on the show. I'm like, are you kidding me? So I text Bobby and Dennis. I'm like, yeah, Eric Bishop's going to be our first guest. Like, are you kidding me?
That's
I'm like,
big.
no. So then, great show, great guy. He's one of the guys I kind of keep in touch with through text and email because we want to have him back on. Then we had Buff Bagwell on. And then another favorite of mine is we had, I don't know if you guys are UFC guys, we had Quentin Randy Jackson on.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. How did that happen? 'Cause that's a big name.
So I messaged him on Instagram, and an automatic reply came up because he's involved in the United Fight League, which is a new upstart league based out of Arizona. And they said, for any media inquiries, email this person. I'm like, all right. So I email him. So they want to know what the show is about, yada yada yada. So they said, okay, he'll come on this Saturday at like 1 o'clock. I'm like, and this is like Wednesday. I'm like, all right, we'll figure it out. So the owner of the company emails me and he's like, do you mind if I come on too? I'm like, I don't care who comes on with him as long as we get him on. So it's one of my favorite moments. I call him Bob. I go, hey, Quentin Jackson's going to come on the show. He goes, are you kidding me? And I get a kick out when he gets excited about things. That's when it makes it all worth it, because he was like, we're going to have Quentin Rampage Jackson on our show. I'm like, that's pretty crazy, isn't it? But yeah, he was an awesome guest. I mean, he was a little shy at first, but once we started rolling and talking, he was awesome. Talk about the
Yeah.
18, because he was the 18 remake, and just talk about his fights. Great guy. So we kind of developed a relationship with Harrison Rogers, who owns United Fight League. So I would reach out to him again. I go, hey, I know you have an event coming up in Memphis. Does Quint want to come back on? He goes, well, Quinton's training his son, but I might be able to get Frank Mir on.
Oh,
I'm like,
wow.
all right. So and it was hot and cold. We weren't sure if he was going to come on. So we all get on. It was Harrison, Dennis, and Bobby. Bobby always comes in late. So Frank Mir actually does show up. And so then Bobby shows up on the screen. He's looking. He goes, is that Frank Mir? I go, yes, it is. So he didn't know he was going to come on. So that was pretty cool.
Wow.
Wow, those are big names you've had on. Can you do you have any names maybe coming up that you can disclose at this point?
We've got some guys in the hopper. We're doing a live remote for WrestleMania. But it's going to be a little different because I'll be on a cruise, so I'll be doing mine virtually, as will Dennis. But Bobby and Matt will be on there. They're doing it for the Victory Brewing Company down in Philadelphia, which is going to be a block away from WrestleMania. And we got some guests lined up. So all ECW guys. Tony DeVito will be on there. Tony actually trained Bobby. He'll be on there. And then we're going to do another live show up here for SmackDown. So there's a chance we might get some guests for that one. We're always reached out to guys. Another guy we had on that was really good was Karrion Kross.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
NXT guy, right?
NXT guy.
Or
He's
former?
at SmackDown right now.
Yeah.
He's probably one of my favorites because he does a spot-on impression of Jesse Ventura. And
All right.
before we had him on, I go, Bob, he's got to do the Jesse impression. So I don't know if Bobby told him that beforehand. So we get to the part of the show. I'm like, you got to do it. He goes, well, what impressions do you do? I'm like, I don't do any. All my impressions sound the same. So I went to my Randy Savage impression as he's doing Jesse Ventura. So that was pretty cool. So then he, played along with it. But he was a good guest.
Is there either a wrestler or a UFC fighter who you haven't had on the show yet, you haven't had any contact with yet, but anyone at the top of your mind, you're like, I would love to get that guy on?
So when we first started the podcast, the first person I reached out to was Brian Bosworth.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Because Bobby's a big Bosworth fan.
Yep.
And so I reached out to those people, and they said, if Brian has time, he'll do the show. I reached out to Bosworth probably, not him personally, but his people, almost once every 2 or 3 months, just to poke the bear a little bit.
Yeah.
Because the funny thing is, when Bobby was in AEW, he was doing a thing with Sting. And I texted him the next day. I'm like, that's pretty cool. You're doing a thing with Sting. And Bosworth was there, too, in the audience. He goes, what do you mean? I go, Brian Bosworth was like the third or fourth row. He was at the event. He goes, are you kidding me? I go, I swear to God, he was there. I go, you didn't meet him? He goes, no. So that's kind of funny.
Wow. Something going back, just looking at that, growing up as kids, I would stop by Bobby's house. And I remember he was watching, it was WCW. And I was like, he's like, oh, here's this guy, Sting. I was like, who is this guy? Like, I never saw it before. And we're watching it. And obviously it rivaled WWF at the time. So I'm watching. I was like, oh, it's pretty interesting. And then we ended up going to the RPI Fieldhouse to actually go see a WCW match. And that was, like with all these different franchises, they all have like a different feel, but that was nuts. I mean, just the people in there, they were going bananas. And then seeing the WWF one, obviously you fill up like the Knickerbocker Arena. I remember that one too.
Yep.
And it was just, I guess, like WWF is like more what you see on TV, but WCW, I just remember that just being wild out there with the people getting involved. I mean, they love that stuff.
It's just gritty. It's dirty. It's you're not supposed to watch it as a kid, but you're still watching it type stuff.
Yeah.
Blood and guts.
Is your son or daughter into it?
My son is. My daughter was kind of in the beginning, but then obviously she's 10 now, so she's kind of gotten past that stuff. My son loves. He loves it. He got a kick because a couple months ago Bobby stayed with us, and he thought that was the greatest thing ever. Oh, my Bobby Fish is here.
Yeah.
But he gets into it.
Do you remember your first professional wrestling match you ever went to?
It was ironically at the Heritage Park. It was Hulk Hogan. I think the main event was Hulk Hogan and King Kong Bundy.
Outside?
Yep.
Really?
What year was that?
It had to have been 86 or 87.
Wow.
I don't remember that.
That's crazy. Was it packed? Was it crazy people there?
Oh, it was a lot of people there. We sat, my God, they had the ring, I want to say at home plate, a little after home plate, and we sat like in left field. It was packed.
Gotcha.
Wow.
At the time, it was the height of Hulkamania, so Hulk Hogan was then, so that was a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think when they opened the Knickerbocker Arena, just for trivia, the first guy to open it was Frank Sinatra. And the second guy to come in was WWF. And I remember we got seats with Ricky and Bobby, and his dad were there. And I just remember watching Hulk Hogan come down. I'm like, that guy is walking. He's not, no one's carrying him. I mean, he was just like the biggest human being I ever saw at that time. And we were like in the nosebleed sections. I mean, we were pretty high up. I was like, man, I can imagine what Hulk Hogan must be like in person. I mean, we were there, and that guy was huge.
Nice.
24-inch pythons.
Yes.
Jeez.
Yeah. Everyone wanted to be a Hulkster back then. But all right. Well, let's wrap up with some Colonie this or that questions. And actually, as we're talking about wrestling, I hadn't thought about this question going in, but I'll just throw it out there on an audible here. Since you're such a big wrestling guy, if you were in, let's say we'll call it a 10-man tag team match, you got five guys on your side, you and 4 others. You got to pick 4 others from high school to be on your professional wrestling 5-man team. Who are those 4 others? I can't wait to hear the answer to this. I think I might know, but
I gotta take Bobby. I gotta take Billy Barnes. I gotta take Porta. So I got one more, right?
Yeah.
I'd probably go Steve Bell. How's that sound?
Ooh.
Steve Bell coming in for.
I could see that. I thought you were going to go Jim Haas, but Steve Bell, that's a good call.
You know what? Bell could do some damage. Bell was a little crazy, too. Honorable mention goes to Brian Don Vito, too.
That's a good call.
Yeah, you had some. That's actually a good lineup right there. You're actually going to do some damage. Not bad. All right, so here we go. We're going to go into the world of the arcade. You're in an arcade right now. What are you playing? You walk in there. What are you going to be playing? Dragon's Lair, Space Ace, or Afterburner?
Probably Afterburner.
Not even. You wouldn't even give Dragon's Lair a look. Not really. Interesting.
Your favorite 90s TV show? X-Files, Cops, Seinfeld, or something else?
Probably Seinfeld.
All right.
Nice. All right, so here we go. So one, I need to know, where are you going to go see this? You're going to go see a movie, and I just need to know, are you going to go to Colonie Center? Are you going to go to Northway Mall? Or are you going to go to Crossgates to go see this movie first off?
I might go to Northway Mall because all my friends work there. I could probably get in for free.
And who was that, Nick?
Nick.
Yeah, so I was there, long story. That's probably one of the few jobs I had, like Pat was saying, for a while was there, and Nick was one of my cohorts. So we'll have to keep those stories not to be discussed, but Nick was there.
It's
But
wild.
so what movie? So what movie you gonna go see there? Die Hard with a Vengeance, Casino, or Billy Madison?
Ooh, probably Billy Madison.
Ooh, really?
I want to
Yeah.
laugh. I want to laugh a little bit.
All
Wow.
right. Favorite radio station back in the day for you? I don't even know what kind of music you're into, so I don't even want to give any options. But what radio station were you listening to back then?
Probably 103.9 with Howard Stern.
Okay.
But here's the interesting caveat. When I was a produce manager, one of my guys that worked for me was Peaches, and Peaches was a DJ for Mason and Sheehan back in the day.
I remember that.
Oh, no kidding.
Little known fact there.
Nice. Okay.
Wow. So let me ask you. Oh man, I just had a question. That we were. Oh man, you actually got me flustered now. I actually had a question for you, Pat. You're gonna have to take over here.
All
I
right.
lost my
I'll jump
train.
in here. Do you remember what the first event or show was that you ever saw at the Knickerbocker Arena?
Ooh.
First time you ever walked in there, what were you going there for?
I was late with the. Oh, it was probably a Firebird game. If I had to guess, probably
Okay.
Albany Firebirds.
All right. And actually, now I remembered. So you're gonna go out and grab a bite to eat. Where are you gonna go to? You're gonna go to Bob and Ron's Fish Fry, Platts, or Elkins?
Probably Platts.
Really?
What?
Have my choice. Gonna go Ralph's.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Wow, you're the first
Yeah.
one to say Platts.
Yeah, John and I were trying to think, like, was there any hotspot restaurants on your end of town in the Stanford Heights area? Because I couldn't, the closest one I could think of was maybe DeMarco's, but that's not even like, that's more like Midtown. It's not the west side of Colony.
There is nothing up here. It was all pizza places up here.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Or quarters for wings.
So let me ask. So we'll give you the last word right here. So what do you got coming up, or where do you want our Colony alumni to go help you out with what initiatives you got going on? What can our Colony friends do for you?
Just check out the Undisputed Podcast. We're dropping new episodes generally Wednesday and Thursday. We're going to be on hiatus next week because of the Easter holiday. But again, we're coming back for WrestleMania week. We got BobbyFishApparel.com. I got my official podcast T-shirt on. It's the Garnet and Gold edition podcast T-shirt.
Ooh.
Everything, all of our stuff you can find on Bobby's Twitter and Instagram stuff. I have Twitter too, but we generally migrate towards his stuff. But that's what we got coming up. Again, we got SmackDown in May. Got some guests down the pipe, and look out because we're coming hot and heavy.
Or actually, I just got one more last question. Who's somebody from Colony Central you would like to see come on the Colony Pit here? And you're wondering, like, of all the people you went to high school with, you're thinking, man, I wonder what that person's up to.
There was a couple of them. I kind of know the story, but I like to hear him tell it. Is Corda, because he's an entrepreneur. He's got the Firebirds and stuff like that. And probably Dave Gamble.
Yeah.
Ooh.
DG was in our fantasy football league there for a few years, and he was nothing short of a trash talker. So I do miss those days.
Yeah, DG is in the works. His episodes, I'll just say, are in progress. Let's put it that way. So he is in our funnel though, and we'll have to work on. Quarters floated through the list with John and I as well. So I agree with those picks. But Frankie, thank you for joining us on the Colony Pit. We wish you nothing but the best with your family, your professional endeavors, and thanks for spending some time with us tonight.
Thanks, fellas. Appreciate it.
All right.
Yeah, Frank,
Peace
thanks
out.
again. And everyone, please don't forget to watch Undisputed with Frank, Bobby, and Dennis. On that one, have a good one, and we'll talk to you guys soon.